Welcome to the Blue White Breakdown. Johnny McGonigal here. Max Ralph joining me. Bob has Bears duty tonight, so the pod this week is with me and the newbie Max Ralph, who joined us last week and already getting well acquainted with PennLive, with our posting system. Putting up some stories already, Max. It's been good stuff. And how's your first week been? Let's start there.
It's good. It's been a lot of fun. Like I said last week, I was just super excited to get going. But now I'm recording this on the company issued laptop. Finally, I even got a new microphone today, so I feel like I'm finally here. It feels good. We're cooking with gas now.
There we go. That's what we love to hear. Feels a fish. I dig it. Well, yeah. Look, guys, we're recording this on Tuesday morning, June 4th. Penn State. Coming off its first of a few big recruiting weekends, hosted a handful of top prospects this weekend, and also had a camp, there at the Lash building. So, some recruiting news to come out. No commits to speak of coming out of the first weekend, but some guys that they definitely wanted to get on campus for. For some of them, it was their fifth or sixth time. For some of them, it was only their first or second time on campus. So a big one this past weekend, and they've got plenty coming up too. This weekend and in the weekends ahead. June is always a huge recruiting month. I remember last year there was a flurry of guys who committed to the 2024 class, and wouldn't be surprised if the 2025 and maybe even 2026 class see some commits roll in here in the next. I mean, it could be the next couple of days, it could be the next couple of weeks, but something just to keep in mind throughout the month of June, listeners and subscribers, that it's a big recruiting month. And Max, you wrote earlier this week about some of the camp performances and some of the guys who were on campus, and you weren't there this past weekend, but I know you will be, right, in the upcoming weekends, I believe. But what stood out to you, at least from what was out there, and who was on campus camping this weekend?
Yeah, if you want to start, I think a good place to start out is with the guys who are already committed, right? Beckham Kritza, the quarterback in that 2025 class, and Brady O'Hara, who is a tight end by his listed rankings, but the news out of the weekend is Brady is probably going to be playing offensive line once he gets to campus, which makes sense. I mean, he's kind of profiled that way. He's a bigger body. Mid 6 foot. He's got a lot of frame to be able to put some weight on when he gets here. There's been some discussion about whether he'd really stay as a tight end or not. And this weekend, he was working really closely with Phil Troutwine and Frank Leonard. So looks like that's going to be the path for him, moving forward. And meanwhile, with Kritza, every time, this is now the second time in 3 weeks that he's been on campus to throw, because he attended the Elite 11 session that was in State College as well. And he's starting to look really good. I mean, you can see it. There's pure arm talent. He certainly has to grow into the body a little bit more, but that 6'5" frame is real for him. And he was working with Drew Aller, Danny O'Brien, Andy Kotelnicki this weekend. There's some good videos out there. He looks good. I mean, I think Penn State has to be excited about this kid. And I know you got a chance to talk to him, I believe, last fall. And so I think there's some excitement with him and Brady. But there were a lot of good prospects on campus as well, and especially in the 2026 class. And then a couple of guys in the 2025 who are high priority. Offensive lineman Amory Hills was in town. He was catching a lot of eyes. He's a guy who can swing inside or outside. And then he was getting some good looks against some top D linemen Penn State's looking at, and Zion Ali and Daniel Jennings out there on the defensive end. Both of those guys are in the 2026 class, but Ali, the videos I caught of him, he looks really explosive. So certainly a top priority for Penn State in that class.
Yeah, Beckham really interests me as a prospect, because he's bounced around a little bit, and he went from Miami to Colorado, and there's some family ties both in Colorado and Miami. He goes back now to Miami, I think, for this upcoming season, and he committed. I think it was pretty much right after or right before Yurcich was fired, around that Michigan game in last November, and when he committed, he was he a big presence on like the national circuits, on the recruiting circuits, goes to a lot of camps and everything, and is a well-regarded quarterback. But even when he committed, there was kind of this understanding or this thought that, 2025 could be a 2 quarterback class for
Mhm.
Penn State. It's still just Beckham Kritza in the class right now. They wanted to get Matt Zollers from Springford, missed out on him, and he commits to Missouri. Interested to see if they ultimately still pursue another quarterback in the 2025 class, or if they just decide to focus their efforts. Be comfortable with Beckham in there, and then just look to 2026. And they have had a handful of quarterbacks from the 2026 class be on campus in recent weeks. In the spring, Diabell, who I spoke to a couple weeks ago, is a big prospect when it comes to that. These guys were on campus for unofficial visits, and then showed up for the Elite 11 regional in State College in mid-May. And Diabell is definitely one to watch, especially I believe it was Troy Hun, who was a target as well. He either committed or it was a crystal ball, for him to go to Texas, and so that's a possibility, or was a possibility for Diabell. And if they ultimately take another guy, I think that's a good sign for Penn State. Just reading some of the tea leaves out there right now, but on Brady O'Hara, Max, it's interesting because he's 6'6", 250.
Yeah.
Coming from North Catholic in Pittsburgh, and that's the kind of body type that lends itself to be a tight end. It also lends itself to being an offensive tackle, especially when you're that big this early and you have the frame to be able to fill it out. So it's not a surprise to see him work with Phil Troutline and their offensive analysts on the offensive line in Frank Leonard. So yeah, a couple of interesting tidbits there. I dig it. Is there anything else that stood out to you from the camp circuit this weekend in State College, or anything that really caught your eye?
Yeah, I think the one that might fly a little bit under the radar is actually a PWO offer that I think is worth pointing out. Ty Salazar from State High, a local kid, picked up a PWO offer this weekend. He worked out for Penn State. They asked him to come in, and he looked really good. They clocked him at a 4.5 40, 4.09 shuttle. He is athletic as all get out. I mean, he, in 3 years, set State High's new all-time receiving record and single-season receiving record. He's a heck of an athlete. He's a little undersized, though. He's listed at 5'11", might be less than that. And he's also a big-time lacrosse prospect. So he's going to get to talk to lacrosse coaches this summer and figure that out. But that's a PWO offer for Penn State, a kid that I really think they'd like to get. And he's in their own backyard. And a lot of times I think fans are going to look over at PWO. But that's a kid who, whether it's punt returns, kick returns, he could have some use if he really develops into the athleticism that he's shown in high school.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it is always nice to have that kind of local flavor. Having Keaton Ellis on the team over the last handful of years, and understanding how much it meant to him, to come from State High and come play at Beaver Stadium. That could be a cool situation. But like you said, he's a big lacrosse prospect. Hey, maybe he plays lacrosse at Penn State and
not
doubles
a shabby lacrosse school either.
Yeah, not a bad lacrosse program at all over the last few years. Penn State's been pretty damn good with Tambroni. But I like it. I like it. No, I like that shout. Mentioning local-ish wide receivers. I think a big one this weekend that they had on campus was Lex Cyrus from Susquehanna, a 4-star burner. You talk about a guy with speed. I mean, he was set the PIAA record in the 100-meter, beating Journey Brown's mark, and then I think it was toppled shortly thereafter during prelims a couple weekends ago. But he's a guy who has all the speed in the world, has been on campus multiple times. I believe he's visiting South Carolina this upcoming weekend or the weekend after. But he's a guy who has been on Penn State's radar for a very long time and was on campus, I believe, for a 6th time this past weekend, 5th or 6th time. And so when you look at what Penn State has in the 2025 class, they have one wide receiver already in Lyric Samuel from Brooklyn, but 13 guys in the class right now, and they would love to add. They would love to come away, I think, in 2025 with 3 wideouts, if not maybe even 4. Especially when you look at this room and the state of the wide receiver room that we've discussed so many times already. They lose Keandre Lambert-Smith and they lose a handful of other guys to the portal, depth pieces. Dante Cephas and a Malik McLean, who they had higher hopes for as transfer targets that didn't really pan out. But and you look at what kind of receiver they're trying to go after, and Lex Cyrus kind of fits that build, and not only from a speed and a talent standpoint, but from a keeping best in PA kind of vibe home as well. So I'd like that one personally. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not predicting a commitment or anything, but that kind of feels like one that would make sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. He's been a top priority in that receiver room for a while, and I kind of think the approach as well for this dash to finish the 2025 recruiting cycle is just to get as many wide receivers looks at Penn State as they can, because you said it, they're looking to add more guys, and they just need bodies at this point. They need talent, and I think Lex Cyrus has got to look out for. There were there was a receiver this weekend. He's a couple of classes off, but 2027 Miles McAfee left camp this weekend with an offer. He's listed at 5'11". He also got an offer from Indiana this week. He's a guy who's going to rise up boards, and Penn State's got him in there early. But like I said, I think the idea right now with the way that, plain and simple, Penn State struggled to recruit wide receivers. I think there's some high hopes for this class, this 2024 class that's enrolling now this summer. But I think they just need to get guys on campus, and Lex Cyrus is definitely at the top of that list right now.
Well, Max, let's talk about those guys who are on campus. The summer enrollees from 2024. They had 25 guys sign in the 2024 class back in December. 16 of them were early enrollees, which me and Bob have talked about this before. I mean, the importance of enrolling early. It's really it's really invaluable. Obviously you get the experience of being on campus, and you get the early looks, you get to class, you get into a routine, that kind of thing. But you're also around for winter workouts, you're around for spring ball, you get to compete against juniors and seniors and talk to those guys and learn from those guys. So 16 of those 25 signees from the 2024 class enrolling early was a big deal. But the rest of those 9, I believe 7 of them are now on campus. The last 2 that we're going to be waiting for, the 2 guys from Imhotep in Philly, Tyseer Denmark, the wide receiver, and corner Kenny Wosley. They could be coming in here soon or towards the end of the month in June. Imhotep has a later graduation date than most schools do. But a couple of those guys who have already come in, though, one of them is a wide receiver in Peter Gonzalez from Central Catholic, who I think is a really intriguing prospect. His teammate Anthony Specca, the linebacker, from Central. You've got Corey Smith and Donovan Harbor, the running back and offensive lineman from Waukesha, Wisconsin. I hope I pronounced that right. That class is starting to fill in, and getting all those guys on campus is a big deal. Especially the offensive guys, especially a guy like Peter Gonzalez, and eventually once Tyseer Denmark gets on campus, wide receivers who could theoretically make an immediate impact in a room that is really snaps and playing time is up for grabs. But getting those guys on campus as early as possible now, before training camp, before August training camp starts, with a new offensive coordinator, new system. They've been getting the playbook and they've been studying it, away from campus, but getting them in the building is always a big deal.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I think Peter Gonzalez and Tyseer Denmark are guys who I'm just really excited to see on the field, because Peter is a guy, he kind of breaks the mold with what Penn State's been getting lately. He's a little bit of a bigger body, a little more physical receiver. And then Tyseer Denmark, we caught glimpses of him playing in the Big 33 showcase just a week or 2 ago. Boy, he was making some great contested catches out there. So I think those are 2 guys who, among all of the guys who are coming in this summer, I mean, we've talked a ton about the early enrollees, but the guys who are coming in this summer, I'm not sure that there are bigger eyes on anybody other than Gonzalez and Denmark, because just because of the nature of the wide receiver room, but also because I think that they're 2 guys who are worth looking at. I think they could potentially compete for some playing time this fall, and they both fill needs at the same position that Penn State hasn't had really. So those are 2 guys I'm looking at. I think Corey Smith's an interesting one too, because we know there's obviously Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are elite and at the top of that running back room, but there's some carries up for grabs behind him. So if Smith can come in and really light things up, he's going to have to compete with Quentin Martin, who we already saw some things from, and Cam Wallace. But there are carries up for grabs right now. So there's some guys who have recently come in or are about to come in who definitely are worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, on the running back bit, the most intriguing thing to me during spring ball was that number 3 running back competition because, like
Yeah,
you said, we know what Katron and Nick bring to the table. But after Trey Potts left, and I really do think he was an underrated ad
100% agree.
from Minnesota, and not just from a veteran presence in the locker room kind of deal, but I mean he was a good player whenever he got on the field. I mean he helped them pull away and break things open in the Illinois game. He made some plays for that team last year, and without him in the mix, you're looking at Cam Wallace. At least going into spring, you were looking at Cam Wallace or London Montgomery. Neither of whom saw any snaps as true freshmen in 2023. London Montgomery ends up transferring out at the end of spring ball when that portal reopened. I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall a little bit that Cam Wallace was ahead of him, and Quentin Martin, who came in and for a time was the number 1 recruit in Pennsylvania, depending on which service you look at. If you just look at the tape, he looks like one of the best running backs in the 2024 class in that cycle overall. A phenomenal receiver, the fluidity, the speed, the burst, everything you kind of want in a running back. He had some availability issues, I guess, during spring ball. James Franklin alluded to that after the blue-white game. Best ability is availability, the classic phrase from the NFL that's trickled its way to college. But I think Quentin is going to have a real chance in the summer to emerge a little bit more, and Corey Smith will as well. But there's no pressure for Corey Smith though to come in and perform at the top of his game because you got Nick and Katron. There's no real pressure on the offensive lineman or even like a Malachi Williams, a 4-star defensive end from Monsignor Bonner, who will come, is enrolled now as of a couple weeks ago, but he needs to add probably 20 pounds, right? But there's no pressure for him to come in and contribute immediately in a DN room that has Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, Jamel Lyons, Mean Vanover, Zariah Fisher. But there could be maybe not a little bit of pressure, but a little bit of outside expectations on those 2 wide receivers because we saw that during spring ball, hearing from James Franklin, hearing from the coaching staff, it didn't seem like there were guys that really asserted themselves beyond the Harrison Wallaces and Julian Flemings, who those 2 guys we expect to be starters for this team as long as they're healthy. But beyond that, Caden Saunders, Amari Evans, 2 guys from the 2023 recruiting class who have had 17 combined catches over the last 2 years. You've got, you lose, like I mentioned, McLean, and you lost Cephas in the winter. So I mean, Anthony Ivy, Tyler Johnson, guys who haven't seen the field. Like there's an opportunity there if Peter Gonzalez, who, like you mentioned, is a bigger body, 6'2", 200 pounds, for him to come in there and assert himself and provide a pop. Tyseer Denmark, you mentioned those contested catches in the Big 33 game. That was over a 4-star corner who was going to Maryland. It's not like it was a schlub out there covering him. Yeah. And so I think those guys, I hesitate to say that they'll come in and be a savior, for this offense by any means. But I mean, if they're able to come in one of the 2 and contribute 10 catches, 15 catches as a true freshman and possibly in high leverage spots, I think that adds a lot to the offense.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think saying that you only need about 10, 15 catches out of them is a great way to put it, because if you start to look at this room in levels, you have Trey Wallace and Julian Fleming up near the top, who you expect to get maybe, 70, 80 catches, maybe 50 for Fleming, depending on how things work out. But then that third spot, you need 20, 30 out of Evans and Saunders, but there's still going to be receptions out there that somebody needs to pick up. And if you look at the current outlook right now, I mean, maybe it's Liam Clifford, who we've seen he's able to run some good routes. He's been had a couple of big connections with Drew Aller last fall, but I really think it could be one of those freshmen too. They both bring things to the table. We've said it multiple times, both of us. They both bring things to the table that Penn State hasn't had, that Penn State needs. So I think they've got a chance, and it's just going to be, I think it's a question of how quickly their body can develop, because that's always a big thing. You mentioned it with Quentin Martin. They're really excited about his pure talent and ability, but his actual physical traits were a little bit slow to develop this spring compared to everybody else. He had a little bit of a lesser weight training background in high school compared to some guys. So, that's going to be the question with Denmark and Gonzalez, if they are able to come in and contribute right away, is just how their body responds to the training program that's put on by Chuck Losey and everybody else out there this summer.
Yeah, and I just think too, and I know we both touched on it, but just something to emphasize again is something I feel like Penn State's offense missed last year was the contested catches, the 50-50s, the go up and get it kind of thing. And obviously there's an art to that from a quarterback standpoint, from a play calling standpoint. It's not just chuck it and pray. But you look at when Penn State's offenses have been at their best, or at least when they have been their most talented at receiver, Jahan Dotson, Chris Godwin, even Parker Washington, did it. And last year it just wasn't there. And they were relying a lot on the tight ends in the red zone to do that. And they'll be able to do that this upcoming season again with Tyler Warren, who I think he could have gone into the 2024.
Oh, absolutely.
He could have gone in the second or third round this past, in April, decided to come back, and think he should be a focal point of this offense and get more targets than he did last year. And he still made, he was tied for second most among tight ends in the FBS in touchdowns last year, but I think he could be a 50 catch guy for this season. And I'm interested to see how Andy Kotelnicki kind of works around, the talent that he has at receiver, and, creating space in routes and making their lives a little bit easier, making Drew Aller's life a hell of a lot easier than it was, last year. But again, if you're able to get a guy, and maybe it's Ty Sear, maybe it's Peter Gonzalez, maybe it's someone else in that wide receiver room that is able to go up and bring some of those down and create some more chunk plays for an offense that really lacked it last year, I think that'd be a huge deal. Especially in those bigger games when you just need a spark, or if you're playing a lower level team, Keandre Lambert-Smith provided a spark against Indiana when they needed it. And he's not here anymore. So if you're able to have a guy that can come in and just provide a spark and be comfortable and get into it, I think that really brings a different level and different aspect to the offense. But yeah, Max, is there anything else that you're keeping an eye on over the next few days, or I haven't looked yet at the visitor list for this upcoming weekend. We're recording this on Tuesday. That tends to populate itself a little bit more later in the week. But anything else you have for the listeners before we get out of here?
Nah, I was just going to say, Johnny, you're not suggesting that Denmark and Gonzalez come in and enroll in level 1 Japanese, are you?
No, I'm not. It's a good callback for, it's one of those, if situations.
Yeah, that's a good one. But no, I don't have anything else. I mean, you said it at the top of this. This is going to be a big month, a big summer for Penn State. The 2025 class right now is hovering right around that top 10 mark. Yep. But it's pretty thin at the moment. They need to add some names, and that's going to come. It's going to come in flurries right now, and especially some 2026 guys too as well to keep an eye on. So in midway through June, beginning of July, I mean, I remember 2 years ago they got 3 kids, or 3 years ago they got 3 kids on July 4th. Yep. So be ready. That's all I've got to say.
Max, you and Bob might be busy over the next couple of weeks, because I'm heading out of the country for a couple of weeks. I leave on Friday night, and I'll be gone until it'll be a couple of weeks. So yeah, it's one of those classic kind of sports journalist thing, right? Like when you're covering college football, normally when you're away on PTO on vacation is normally when things hit the fan. But that's what's nice about us at PennLive. We got 3 guys on the beat, nose to the grindstone, and I'm fully expecting, as soon as I take off and land, across the pond, that Penn State will end up having 3 verbal commits, and I'll be seeing stories from you and Bob. But
it's a guarantee. It's an
absolute guarantee. But awesome. No, listeners, subscribers, keep, obviously, I think Max and Bob, you guys will have a podcast, I'm assuming next week, but over the next few days, we'll have plenty of content coming out. I believe my Andy Kotelnicki one-on-one feature story is planned for later in this week, so keep an eye out for that. I also was able to speak to Sean Clifford, backup quarterback for the Packers, obviously a record holder and a longtime starter at Penn State. He had some really cool things to say about Drew Aller, about what he hopes to see from Drew this upcoming season. I was able to speak to him earlier this week, so Q&A with Sean Clifford is also coming later in the week, and Max and Bob, you guys have a lot of stuff coming out as well. So, everyone is listening and subscribing to PennLive. Keep close tabs on all of that as the news continues to trickle in with Penn State football in this early June.